My name is Jessica Eucher. In 2010, I was given the opportunity of a lifetime to study abroad in Graz, Austria. But this program was so much more than a study abroad program. I became part of an international family that's been growing since the late 1940s. I'm so proud to be a participant and a lifetime member of Overseas Neighbours.
For students who have never been beyond the boundaries of their own comfort zone, it's still a big world until they get out there and start exploring it.
I always wanted to study in Europe.
I wanted to get a real taste of the culture of Graz itself.
The friendships that I have made over there, have lasted for 30 years now.
Montclair was the start of all of this. It really opened the eyes to the possibilities that are out there.
Montclair, I thought, was so fantastic.
I couldn't think of a better destination to study abroad than Montclair.
Overseas Neighbours is an organization of the sister cities of Montclair, New Jersey, and Graz, Austria. Forged in the aftermath of World War II, the relationship is still vibrant today, mainly in the form of a student exchange program between each city's universities. This film will examine the origins of the organization and the connections of the people whose lives have changed because of this sister city relationship. Our story starts in the dark days of World War II. In 1938, in one of the first acts of World War II, Germany annexed Austria, a German-speaking country. Austrians served in the German army, and the country functioned as part of the Axis powers. During the war, the destruction throughout Europe, including Austria, was devastating. Aerial attacks conducted by Allied forces left much of the continent in shambles. The Allies specifically targeted enemy means of transportation. Many railways, bridges, and docks were destroyed. In May of 1945, when the war ended, Europe was in danger of never recovering from the devastation. Graz, an industrial center, was hit hard by Allied bombing.
Europe was devastated, cities in ruins.
This was a war-ravaged area, it was very poor. There are stories actually of people in Graz where people did not have enough money for shoes.
We had meat once a week, usually on Sunday. And our clothes, I had to wear it twice after my two sisters.
Unlike at the end of World War I, the Allies were convinced they needed to help Europe rebound. In 1947, Harry S. Truman's Secretary of State, George Marshall, came up with a plan to aid Europe in its recovery. This is the start of what would become the Marshall Plan.
It's one of the few times that statesmen have actually learned from history. They realized they did not want a repeat of the aftermath of World War I.
The Marshall Plan was based on providing economic support to help rebuild the economies of Europe and to prevent the spread of Soviet communism. The citizens of the northern New Jersey town of Montclair wanted to help. An affluent community, many of its citizens worked in New York City and had international connections and the means to help. Within the town of Montclair was Montclair State Teachers College, a well-respected institution with international ambitions. Residents chose a city near the so-called Iron Curtain to halt the spread of communism.
They just looked at the map and then they found out that there was a little city by the name of Graz, which is the closest to the Iron Curtain, and so Graz became the offer to be in friendship with Montclair.
Montclair sent food and medical supplies to the city of Graz. Soon, city officials were visiting each other. The relationship was beginning.
They sort of built the bridge between, across the Atlantic between Montclair and Graz. They were just fabulous, dedicated people who believed that the people-to-people contact is more important than any political thing. They always said that friendship and understanding between the people bridges any political border.
The leaders of Montclair and Graz decided one of the best ways to build this bridge was to create a student exchange program between the University of Graz and Montclair State Teachers College, as it was known at the time.
It's a very special program because it also shows that it was possible already in 1950 to accept students from Austria to go to the US and not see them as the enemies at that time, but see them already as young people that needed support in not only developing their own lives in terms of their academic careers, in terms of what they're studying, but just in interacting with the community in Montclair and taking that back to the city of Graz. And in a way, it was sort of an exchange of spirits.
This was an earth-shattering thing, World War II. Earth-shattering in every way. And our students get to go to a place where they can study what that meant, understand what that meant from a place and a people that were right in the center of it.
I was so fortunate to participate in this exchange program. Now we're going to introduce you to some other students, both from Graz and Montclair, and let them tell you their stories about how this incredible exchange program changed their lives and helped forge a bond between these two cities. Our journey starts in Austria with a woman who came to America during the 1960s. Her name is Friedel Hertel. Her father was an accountant and their home was destroyed during the war. When did you go to Montclair on exchange?
I went to Montclair in the year 1967-68, and I was the famous, crazy Austrian student on the bicycle.
And how was it possible for you to travel?
We went by boat, a small group of Austrian students, and to the States we were 10 days on the boat.
Can you describe Montclair in the late 60s when you arrived?
Very quiet, nice houses. It looked like a park, but you could get everything. Once I could hear some boys behind me, oh, she hasn't shaved her legs, because this was at this time rather unusual in Europe.
After Friedel Hertel finished her studies, she took a trip to see America.
I got from overseas neighbors a ticket for a Greyhound bus. It cost $99 and had a value for 3 months. I went by myself and started in New York and went to Washington, D.C., Reno, Los Angeles, and San Francisco.
1968 must have been a fascinating time for a young girl from Austria to be in the United States. During her time in Washington, D.C., she met a very famous politician.
I went to the White House and I recognized that the man came out from the area, and it was Robert F. Kennedy, very friendly, very open, and I had a book written by him and asked for a signature, and I got it.
Let's see. For Friedel
Glauer. That's the maiden name.
With best wishes, Robert F. Kennedy. Less than 1 month later, Robert Kennedy was murdered in Los Angeles. As a student of voice and theater studies at Montclair, I had never even heard of Graz until I met the current exchange student from there. When I found out about the scholarship offered to 2 students each year, I was only in my first semester of German at Montclair. It had always been a dream of mine to live in Europe. A few months after applying, I found out I was going to be spending my next year studying in Graz. Our next story comes from Günther Pichler, who had many adventures around the United States when he traveled from Graz in the early 1970s. What was it like, your first impression coming into Montclair?
I was amazed by the state of liberty there. It was just an extremely liberal atmosphere over there.
How was that different then from what you were experiencing in Graz before you left?
Here everything was forbidden which wasn't allowed, and In the States, it was the opposite. Everything was allowed which wasn't forbidden.
Günther lived in Freeman Hall.
There was always one floor girls and one floor guys, and I was on 608 on the floor, and the oldest guy in our floor was Mr. Koch, and he said, we have to make a party with these girls up there. They are so nice. Günther, you come with me, and we are going to buy food. We're making burgers and get some beer, and we will have a good time. So I went down with him, and he disappeared in that big store. And I said, where are you going? What are you doing? We need some meat. Yeah, said that's where I'm going to. And he went and bought a complete case full of dog food. And I said, what are you going to do with the dog food? He said, we will see. They will be the best burgers. You can't imagine, we make 50-50 this dog food, and then we go to the and don't you ever dare to tell anybody about this. And so we mixed that up, and very spicy, and it was a great party, I can tell you.
And nobody ever knew
until
now. Can you tell us about your adventures traveling around the United States?
I was working in Pennsylvania during the holidays to make some money, and I found a friendly person who lent me his car, and since I found out I have such a strong engine here, why do I have to go 55 miles an hour? So I went speeding up these wonderful highways in Pennsylvania, and it didn't take long, so the police stopped me. All that what I have earned within 6 weeks working, I had to give them the police to pay my fine. And then at the end of since I have paid all, I asked the officer, can't you pose with me for a picture so that I have a little souvenir from this adventure? And he agreed.
I spent the year studying mostly voice and some theatre classes at the KUG, the Kunstuniversität, the Performing Arts Conservatory in Graz. I made lots of wonderful friends, many of whom were also international, from Slovenia, Iran, Italy, and Hungary, to name a few. Because of Austria's central location and the financial support of the scholarship, I was able to travel to 11 European countries. I also met my future husband, and we credit the romantic atmosphere of Graz with our having fallen in love. Now we'll hear from some members who studied abroad in the 1980s. First, a woman with German heritage who went to Graz in 1981. Her name is Heidi Anderson. What was your impression of Graz when you first arrived?
I remember die Sporgasse with the cobblestones. That leaves such an impression of like a typical European street in my mind, and then the fountain on the Hauptplatz. I remember doing a lot of walking. Sometimes I wish I could go back and walk those streets again.
How would you say that your perspective or you yourself grew or changed during that year in Graz?
Oh, I definitely became more independent because I was totally on my own and had to figure out where to go and what to do. And it gave me a lot of confidence to do all those things. And it made me fluent in German, which was great. And I remember the year I came back to Montclair for my final year. I'd always been a B student in German, and I actually got A's that year. So, and I think that was from just being around the language for a full year.
Heidi went on to have a family, and her children followed in her footsteps.
We were at the Austrian consulate yesterday for my middle daughter, who got an internship to work in Vienna for the summer. And my oldest daughter also did a summer program in Würzburg, Germany. So all three of them have been taking German throughout their school life. And my youngest is still in high school, and she's in an honors program learning German there.
Would you encourage people, no matter who they are or what age they are, to go abroad, to go to Austria, to go to Graz?
It's a great city for students to go to. It is a big university city, but it's rather one of those cities that's off the beaten track for a tourist. And I think that's what makes it special. It's a city with somewhat of a homey feel to it.
Next, we traveled a couple dozen kilometers outside of Graz to the town of St. Nikolai, where we met Astrid Verschauner-Pickel outside of her 300-year-old family farmhouse. Astrid was a student in Montclair in the early 80s. She took us to lunch in town, and we stopped by a local distillery where they make, of all things, Austrian whiskey.
Ist zu 100% aus Gerste.
On the way back to her home, we stopped when we saw a family leaving a beautiful chapel after a baptism. They were wearing traditional Austrian dress. It was such a lovely reminder that Austrians continue to value their cultural heritage. Astrid remembers one thing that was very different about being a student in America.
Being able to call your teachers by their first name was a big change for me. But I felt that I still had a lot of respect for my teachers.
Astrid lived in Blanton Hall.
I was lucky because I got a room that had a window to the outside and not a room to the inside. Because I can remember people on the same corridor who had a room to the inside. They always knocked on our doors in the morning and said, "Can we check what the weather is like outside, because we have to pick our wardrobe."
Did you live with other international students?
I had an American roommate. The first one, I think, was quite shocked that I had never been to McDonald's.
How would you say the exchange program benefited you as a person?
It broadened my horizon. Montclair, I thought, was so fantastic because you could benefit of all the advantages New York City has to offer, but you didn't have to stay in New York City. And I just enjoyed the fact that you could hop on the bus around the corner from the college and take the bus, and in 20 minutes you were at Port Authority in the middle of Manhattan, and you could take advantage of all of it.
One of her favorite things to do was go to the city during a blizzard.
All the people left and New York was like ours, and we could walk on the streets and so on. We could go to all the museums. Nothing was crowded, and every time we made it back home, we were never stranded in the blizzard in New York.
After our interview, Astrid took us to a real Austrian treat. I remember going to many of these while I was a student here. It's called a Buschenschank, which is a place where they serve local wine and food. On this day, she took us to an annual festival near St. Nikolai.
This festival takes place once a year in June, and they call it Riegel Aufi, Riegel Obi, which means up the hill and down the hill. And you see the steep hills of the vineyards. Because the vineyards are so steep here, most of the work has to be done by hand.
While Astrid was in Montclair, Jeff Gould was on exchange in Graz. Jeff is a high school history teacher and an adjunct professor at MSU. Why did you want to go to Graz?
The experience to live in Europe. I mean, I'm a history major, and my concentration was actually Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. So to be able to live in Europe and see these places and know that so many countries are very close to one another that you can travel, and then also to be able to learn German fluently, especially in Graz. I mean, there's history on every street. I mean, the buildings and the facades and things like that. So when I had free time, I was always walking around and looking at things and inquiring, and so it was a fantastic opportunity.
Did you make a lot of Austrian and German friends while you were there then?
Oh, I made a lot of Austrian friends. I mean, especially in the dorm. One of them, Willie, is one of my best friends now. You know, the friendships that I have made over there, I mean, have lasted for 30 years now. So that's a very important thing. I mean, you know, one person at a time, you know, one village at a time, and it's been fantastic.
Have you been back to Graz since then?
Oh, I've been back many times. In fact, 7 years after I studied in Graz, in 1990-91, I went back to Austria and I taught at an international school in Vienna for a year. And then I guess in the course of the 30 years since I've been to Graz, I have been back numerous times to visit my friends, to ski.
As a historian, what's your expert opinion on the importance of this Graz-Montclair exchange?
Oh, I think it's very important because it's one of the few times that statesmen have actually learned from history. They realized they did not want a repeat of the aftermath of World War I, and therefore they introduced things like the Marshall Plan and programs like these sister city exchanges between Montclair and Graz, people-to-people programs. Europe was devastated, so they had these programs like this so people could see what was going on in these different places, for the Austrians to learn how a democratic society functions, for the students from Montclair to go over, see the devastation of World War II, hopefully be moved to want to help them.
As a teacher, what's the significance of students going over?
You know, I tell my students all the time that you need to, I think everybody should do a year abroad or even a semester abroad so that you can see that not everybody lives like we do in the United States. I think most people realize that, at least at a visceral level, but you need to go and see how other people do things, the type of houses they have, the jobs that they have, and things like that, and learn that, you know, the way we do things here in the United States may not always be the best.
In June 2012, I was part of a select choir from Montclair State called Vocal Accord that was invited by the KUG to perform in Graz. The trip with the 24-voice project choir began in Vienna and finished in Venice, but the week spent in Graz rehearsing and performing was the highlight. I was so grateful to have been given the opportunity to return so soon to the place I fell in love with. The mayors of Montclair and Graz are central to the sister city relationship. While we were in Graz, we were invited to meet the mayor, or Bürgermeister, as he is known. He introduced us to the next pair of Graz students who will come to Montclair next year. He says this relationship is special.
One of the best partnerships we have is the partnership with Montclair, because since so many years we try to have an exchange between students. And what's better in this world to make this world peaceful, to work the people together, we have to bring them together. And when we bring the young students together, they will learn a lot from each other, from the culture, from the religions, from the history. And maybe we do a good job for a better world in the future.
We contacted a former mayor of Montclair named Cliff Lindholm. He served as mayor from 1988 to 1992. He and his wife, Karen, now live in Georgia and flew up for the interview.
At that time, Karen and I were dating. I was sworn into office in July, and about November or so, I learned that Graz was going to have a major Sister Cities Acknowledgement celebration in Austria. And I started thinking and was urged that as the mayor of Montclair, I should go to Graz and participate in that event. It occurred to me as I was doing that Karen probably would want to come along, but at that time I didn't think Graz would welcome a mayor with just a friendly girlfriend. And so unfolded a rather important event in my life, and that is, I proposed to Karen in May, and I said, why don't we take our honeymoon in Graz?
We were at this huge castle. It was an Oktoberfest, and Mayor Stingel had his official duties. And after about an hour, Mayor Stingel came up to me and said, let's get out of here. And we went and had dinner together. And we ended up walking arm in arm, humming tunes from La Boheme, because he's a wonderful opera lover. And we became fast friends. And it was about 6 months later that Mayor Stingel and his wife came to Montclair and stayed in our home.
Oh, and that was another story.
That was a fabulous story, because I had Mayor Stingel in my apron washing dishes in my kitchen and was very friendly.
While we were on our honeymoon in Graz, we became friendly with the museum director. And we got talking, and he said, you know, next year we're going to have an international photographic exhibition. Maybe some of your Montclair photographers would like to submit a selection of their photos for consideration. I said, gee, that sounds great. Send me details about this Graz photographic exhibition. Lo and behold, it's a photographic exhibition of nudes. With some assistance from Montclair State, I was identified and given the names of several very competent professional photographers who did nude photography. And we got together 2 submissions from North Jersey photographers of nudes that were sent to Graz and exhibited, and part of their catalog and everything else. And the mayor was very happy that it worked out okay, but we didn't publicize the whole event too much.
And I think the sister city relationships are really people to people, you know, and it's that personal contact with kids here, with kids from there, and so we have the exchange relationship. I mean, if I can have the mayor in my kitchen with an apron on, and we were walking arm in arm down the streets of Graz, singing themes from La Boheme, it just cemented a wonderful relationship. And I think that's one of the things that's very important about this sister city relationship. I can't speak to others. To me, it is that personal, people-to-people relationship. And that's what Eisenhower wanted, was a people-to-people relationship.
The current mayor of Montclair is Robert Jackson. He says Montclair is a great place for people to come and learn about America.
What they find about Montclair is, again, because of this wonderful mix of people and cultures. You know, you can go to Montclair and get any type of food that you want if you want to dine out. The art community is just this wonderfully sort of you know, eclectic place, and people find that if you don't want to live Manhattan, this is probably your second best choice, because, you know, Montclair Art Museum, Montclair State University, restaurants, film festival, all those things that really make a place a happening spot, we have it.
Through the years, more and more people have become part of this exchange. But there's one Austrian immigrant who has had more of an impact on the American side than anyone else. She's been with Overseas Neighbors for over 40 years, and her name is Juliana Belsack.
We've had several presidents, but I was probably the longest serving one, on and off. I think I've had every job in that organization.
Juliana has helped raise funds, seek out new participants, organize get-togethers, and she's driven students to and from the airport, among other things. Do you remember any students that were on an exchange through the Overseas Neighbors program?
I remember quite a few, a lot of them. In fact, with many of them I'm still in contact. Some have married here, and some have married in Austria. That's the way it is, that's the way it goes. Friendships are maintained, marriages are made. But most of all, I think the most important part that I feel about this exchange is that it opens the horizon of young people when they travel abroad. If they come to America or if they go to Europe, to Austria, I think it's just the most important thing to do, even today still.
Juliana Belsack is really the engine behind the Graz relationship. Without her, I don't know how this would have survived as much as it has. She is a wonderful human being with lots of energy and so much dedication.
Juliana always had an open house for all of us, and she has so much stuff going on in her own life, but there was always time and to come over, and she would invite us for meals or just hang out, and she would make some Wiener Schnitzel or something to make us feel at home.
Was there any period where there weren't any student exchanges?
There was. You had to bring that up, didn't you? I didn't want to talk about that.
Although this relationship has fostered peace for decades, there was a time of uncertainty in the 1990s. A politician by the name of Jörg Haider had gained popularity in Austria. Haider was viewed by many as a threat to peace. His nationalistic anti-immigration and anti-EU views did not sit well with many residents in the United States, and particularly Montclair.
Mr. Haider was very radical, and there was just a protest worldwide. He had a great following, and somehow he managed to get into the government, but it was a political upheaval on both sides of the Atlantic. The Austrian people, once the elections were over, couldn't believe that has happened. We have had cancellations here of scholarship for a year, and parents not willing to let their students travel to Austria. And we got it all reestablished. We think we did a good job in doing that.
Well, at that time, actually, I was on the board of directors of Overseas Neighbors here in Montclair, and there was some rumblings in Montclair, some discontent that because of Jörg Haider and his association with conservative politics in Austria, that maybe Montclair should sever or reduce its ties with Graz. And in fact, many of us who have had connections with Graz, former exchange students, the current exchange students from Graz, we went to a town council meeting down in City Hall and spoke out about why this exchange program is so important to those who had already done it, and for future students that we need to have these people-to-people exchanges so people can learn. I mean, by cutting ties that would serve nobody's purpose.
Another person who's spent decades working on the relationship between the cities and the universities is Roberta Meyerhofer. At the time of the Haider controversy, she was the vice-rector at the University of Graz.
It was interesting that Montclair was the only university that did not send students. There were a lot of discussions on that level, and I think it reflects the special relationship between Graz and Montclair that happened. And I think that Montclair took the relationship very seriously, and if you see those incidents that they did not nominate students to come, in a positive way, you could say it sort of valued that relationship to such a point that they did not want to support a system that lent itself to right-winged ideology. But on the same time, for me as a vice-rector, there was a moment of disappointment within the relationship between Graz and Montclair, because if this sort of situation is as it was sort of portrayed, then Austria would need even more support and not less support. And I think that sort of as soon as that decision was made in Montclair, I think the officials also regretted that decision.
Dr. Susan Cole, current president of Montclair State University, was not at MSU at the time, but she says that the world is an imperfect place and sometimes students can learn from that.
We do want them to understand that it is important to have some courage, some fortitude, and to go out into the world even when conditions may not be ideal. Of course, if you look out into the world, there are lots of countries out there where we want our students to have some experience, and those countries may not be at any given moment in time very happy with the United States. There may be political issues, economic issues that are happening at any moment in time. That's part of life. That's part of what there is to discover and to understand. If we want young people to be able to build a better world than we did, they have to understand the good with the bad, the difficult with the easy, the not so pleasurable with the pleasurable. So my inclination would always be, as long as I think it's reasonably safe, would be go. Go. Life is short. From my end of it, you really understand how short it is, but we can deepen it enormously by taking some risks, by taking some chances. I don't like sending students abroad to an American program with American kids taught in English. That's what I love about the Graz program. Our students go to Austrian universities and they get German and they get culture and they are somewhere else. They're not in a little American enclave in Austria. It's not always comfortable, but it's always character building.
Despite this one hiccup, the Montclair-Graz student exchange continued to thrive. The next person we will meet is a young woman who came to Montclair in 2006 and found love. Her name is Martina Kögler-Abdi.
I've met so many people from all over the world, and among them, a wonderful young Somali guy who lived at the same floor. It's a funny story how we actually met. It was about 2 weeks into the semester, and I had already heard rumors. There was this party apartment and where all the people go and hang out. I was like, okay, that's the cool guys. And one night there was a fire alarm and the building had to be evacuated. And that's where we met for the first time. It was like love at first sight in this beeping loud screeching fire alarm sound and the orange lights, and then we looked at each other at the stairs while evacuating, and yeah, so he seized the opportunity to invite me to his next party, and the rest is history.
Do you have any anecdotes for us about your time, other than meeting your husband, your
Yes.
time in Montclair?
I fell in love with Montclair. It's such a cute little town. I think in the end what carries it is a community at the school. Graz is a wonderful place, but it's relatively small. In Graz still there's a tendency, if you don't know people that are from a different place than where you are from, there is certain fears. I understand that, but then again, meeting people and actually getting in touch is the only way to see these people are as human as you, and there is no need to be afraid. So this is definitely a central theme that has come through my exchanges and through all my work.
Speaking of love stories, I guess I should tell you about mine. Wynne and I met at a Halloween party when I was visiting a friend studying in London. I must have made an impression that night, because as soon as I landed back in Graz, I had a message from him asking if he could book a flight to come visit me. That 3-day weekend in Graz was a dream. We fell hard and fast in love. We flew back and forth over 20 times that year between London and Graz, and then continued the pattern when I returned to Montclair for 2 years to finish my degrees. We finally settled down in London and got married. For all of us fortunate enough to have spent the year in Graz since the early 2000s, there is one person we all refer to as Grazmutti, or Mom. She's the heart and soul of the Austrian end of Nachbarn in Übersee. And like Juliana, she's dedicated so much to organizing and continuing the program. In 2003, she got a job as the head of international relations for the city of Graz. Although she's retired now, she is still and will always be our Grazmutti. How did you get the name Grazmutti?
Yeah, because I was somehow like a mother. If somebody lost the wallet and ran out of money, what to do? Call Maxi, and all kinds of things.
Everything was called Maxi. Your coffee pot doesn't work. You can't get your phone to do something. I so appreciated having you while I was here.
I love it, and I love all of you. You have become my kids.
Vlad, tell me a little bit about our Grazmutti here.
Maxi is absolutely fantastical. I don't know a single person who has ever come from Montclair to Graz, or generally any person who would not be super in love with Maxi. She's taking a lot of care of us, really. She's very approachable, and we're very glad to have her around.
She's just great. She has a great understanding of young people. She loves being around young people, and she loves helping students and making their life easier. And she really is like a mother here in Graz.
She keeps the whole group together. She always makes sure that everybody's there who's interested, who wants to be there. And she organizes all the trips, and it's always really fun to go on the trips, like a Buschenschank trip or Martini Gansel, all the traditional things.
Do you notice from the first time you meet the American students when they come over to when they leave, a change in them, a growth, some sort of eye-opening development?
Yes, I think so. Most of them do. I mean, not all of them, but most of them. First thing, they mature. I mean, that's for many students, it's the first time that they've been away from home. And you have to be responsible for yourself for the first time for so many students.
A lot of the students that come over to Graz, myself included, are very passionate now about Graz. They feel it's home, they have made it their home. Can you talk about some of the students that have either stayed here or become very connected with it?
Now it's much more people to people. Because we get together, we become friends, and with Facebook and all those new medias, we are lifetime friends. We don't get lost for each other. And to me, it really means a lot. I really like it to be with the students, to be helpful if they need me. Yeah, and as I said, most of you became my kids.
Without the support of the leaders of each university, this relationship would not be possible. I had the chance to sit down with Montclair State University President Susan Cole and Rector of University of Graz, Kristen Neuper.
Montclair State University is really committed to global education. We really want our students to understand the world and to be comfortable in the whole world. And Graz is very special because this is really our first international relationship. It began after World War II. Since that time, we have sent large groups of students. The chorus was recently in Graz, and we have many faculty who do research collaboratively with faculty members in Graz. And there are a whole variety of exchange programs now, and we let it all grow, 1,000 flowers blooming.
This is the main goal of this project, to bring people together from these different nations and overseas nations. And this was, for the history of our city, it was very important to have this help at that time. So it's more than 60 years ago. And when I think back what let's say, my parents told me and about that time, so after World War II, I think it was a very, very important sign for the citizens of our city and the students at the university to have this partnership with Montclair. So they started and they helped us at the right time. So it really, I can imagine, it was very hard at that time, and the universities didn't have the equipment and the resources they needed. Even there was a shortage of food for people, and so it was really hard. And I think in such a time it's very important to have, let's say, friends somewhere who care and who really try to get this relationship.
Where does Austria and Graz especially fall in the context of the history of Western literature, which we are graced with here in America?
I think maybe what you're asking is, why Graz? Why Austria? And I think the answer to that is, it's right in the center of Europe. It is a country that is rich, really rich in culture. Graz is a beautiful city, wonderful universities, museums, music that is extraordinary, a stone's throw from Vienna. It is a terrific place for our students to be able to have the experience of Europe. The world has gotten much smaller than it was, but still, for students who have never been beyond the boundaries of their own comfort zone, it's still a big world until they get out there and start exploring it.
This special program really it endured so many years, and it's very central at our university. And we should think about how to develop new projects. I think it's really important to keep on this relationship for the next future, but developing it further so that we can maybe find new ways how to collaborate, and this will be the goal for the next future.
Next on our journey, we went to visit a set of friends who came to Montclair on the exchange years apart, but forged a great friendship with much of the credit going to overseas neighbors. Dominika Stieger was a student in Montclair in 2005 and 2006, and Eva Pfeffer studied at MSU in 2008 and 2009.
After I came back, I wrote a report about my year. It was a requirement for the program too, and it was online.
I found it online and I wrote her an email asking her for tips. So she wrote me back an email, really amazingly long email, explained everything to me and how great it is and I should really do it.
After Eva went to Montclair, Domi came and visited her.
We had so much fun and we got along so well. It was the first time we really spent time together. Yeah. But it worked out well, and then we decided I would come back, and I came back in February. And ever since we came back, we had this friendship, and it's still strong.
What are some of the differences that you guys experienced between the school in Montclair and the school in Graz?
In the beginning, I always felt like in a Hollywood movie about college, with all the people in Blanton Hall. That was really memorable, with the people in their PJs and fluffy slippers. And also the pledging, that was something I had never seen before.
How often have you been back to Montclair?
I try to go every year, usually in spring, and most of the times we go together. It's always not just Montclair, it's always New York and some other place, so I try to travel all of the United States.
Ava likes America so much that her father built her a replica of an American home.
I'm always the American girl. Whenever I'm with other friends who haven't been to America or haven't been for such a long time, I'm always the American.
On our trip through Graz, we had the opportunity to sit down with the 2 students from Montclair who were a part of the exchange while we were there. For Wendy Timmons, her first time in Graz was more than a test of her German. It was also a test of the strength of her relationship with her boyfriend.
My boyfriend that I've been dating for 2.5 years came to visit me in February for 3 weeks. It was really pretty excellent having him here. And just getting to share this experience with him was probably the best part. I think seeing me here living my own dream has sort of motivated him to get back on track, work towards maybe getting into a career or going back to school.
Do you feel like your experience here has brought something new to the relationship?
In a weird way, it's improved our trust. Even though we're 2 continents apart, at times it was stressful being so far apart, but I would say for the most part we've been able to communicate well with each other.
The other Montclair student in Graz was Gabriel Baseman. Gabe and I were members of the choir that came to Graz the year before.
How did your impression of Graz change then, this year that you spent versus the week that you spent with the choir?
Well, I spent pretty much as much time as I could just being with the locals, seeing what it's like to live in the street and to, get up in the morning and go out and go to school or whatever it is to do, go home, buy groceries, make your own food, just to get a taste for what it's like for people to live here.
Can you talk about some of the cultural differences then between Graz and Montclair?
Well, one thing, and this is not to put down New Jersey or Montclair, but the people here are so nice and welcoming and open. I mean, you walk down the street and people, will just pass you on the street and, "Grüß Gott," which is the universal greeting here. They're so nice, and it's funny. Little old ladies will hold doors for you. It's just something I find very amusing. Like if you're a young man, little old ladies will hold the doors for you. The Austrians, they love to have food. They love to feed you. Wherever you go, they feed you. Going out to the Bush and Shanks, that's one of my favorite things to do. It's this whole little world of food. And you go there with a group of people. Usually they have nice benches and awnings and things. They usually tend to be the same format. And you eat, and usually you just stay there until 11, 12 at night. And you just sit and talk. And they don't pressure you in any way to finish or anything. They just let you kind of do your own thing there. It's a nice relaxed party situation.
Can you talk about what Overseas Neighbors has done for you this year?
Overseas Neighbors is like a godsend. They help you with so much. They synchronize things. When I first arrived, I was picked up by Maxi Oifrick, who of course is the head of Overseas Neighbors. She picked me up in her car at the airport, drove me to the dorm here, to the Studentenheim. She took me from point A to point B and point C, because Overseas Neighbors is a very well-connected organization. There are a lot of things they're able to help us exchange students with.
Back in Montclair, I got to live with 2 exchange students from Graz, Christian and Petra. I had an immediate connection with them simply because I was part of this organization, and we have called the same places home.
Had you always wanted to study abroad in your undergraduate?
It was always a dream of mine to study abroad, and Montclair, I couldn't think of a better destination to study abroad than Montclair.
Why Montclair?
The people here in Montclair are amazing. I've never met that many awesome people, and it's just such a diversity. You can meet people from everywhere here. Like I met people from Venezuela, from Asia, from Europe, from Canada, like from all over the world you meet people, and this is really a unique thing I've never experienced before in my life.
Petra was also a voice student at Montclair, so in addition to sharing an apartment, we shared a common interest and lots of mutual friends, both in Montclair and Graz. In fact, she liked it here so much, she's staying and getting her master's.
I had it in the back of my mind before I came already, but it was clear for me that I need to see it, I need to come, make my own opinion here.
Was there anything that you found here that you hadn't experienced, food or otherwise, that you fell in love with and will miss when you go back to Graz?
Pancakes. I'm in love with pancakes because I like the Austrian version of pancakes already so much. It's called palatschinke, and pancakes is just the fluffy version of it. It's great. It's perfect breakfast.
So I imagine when you were looking at where you could study abroad, the fact that Montclair was close to New York City was a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
And an attraction. How did you make the most of Montclair's proximity to New York?
I was there, let's say, 3 times a week because I had dance classes there, because I met up with friends there. I just tried to spend free time there. I just tried to be there as often as possible. I tried to use the cultural scene. I tried to go to the Met, Carnegie Hall, Broadway, other concerts. Of course, shopping. That's a big thing in America, and it was great in New York City.
And what are your plans for next year?
I will teach in a German-speaking school in Manhattan as a music teacher. I will work as a music teacher. And I'm very happy that this developed out of my year here. So it's not just me as a student anymore, it will also be a part-time employment waiting for me when I come back, which is really nice.
In the last 6 decades, some of us have made lasting friendships. Others have fallen in love. But all of us have found a second home. Although the seas separate us, we remain neighbors at heart. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey to discover the history and legacy of these 2 great cities, Graz and Montclair. This long relationship and exchange program has changed the lives of so many and will continue to do so. As they say here in Austria, it's never goodbye, just auf Wiedersehen.